Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT11, and BT11 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the brand new villain deck in the form of Galacticmon. So if you're unfamiliar with Galacticmon's origins, he was the final boss in Digimon World 3 all the way back on the PS1, and it's nice to see that in a set that's utilizing some Digimon World support, he is making an appearance here, and he's going to be a pretty interesting deck to be playing around with, just because he has the utility of utilizing lots of Vemmons to fuel your evolutions to be able to do various different things, going all the way up into a powerful Galacticmon. So for this deck, Bandai actually did give us their interpretation of what the deck is going to look like, with a couple of staples laid out and their basic strategy in how to utilize your cards, which I'll go over more in depth because the deck is a pretty straightforward deck when it comes to how to build and how to play it. But that's just their interpretation of the deck, and this is my interpretation of the deck. You can see that we're trying to do basically the same type of things, utilizing very similar cards. I'm just opting to reduce the amount of Vemmons to try to increase the amount of deck space that I have for some of the other tech and tools that I feel like would be more beneficial for the deck overall. So with all that said and done, let's go over the deck profile, starting off with the Digitama. So the Digitama is going to be 4 copies of Dorimon. There is zero reason to run anything else, just because nothing else is really helping the deck, and Dorimon is interacting with the deck because we do want to increase our inheritable sources when we're utilizing some of our card effects, so Dorimon is just the best Digitama for this, allowing us to draw a card when we do that. Next, on to the level 3s, I'm going to be running 20 copies of Vemmon. So Vemmon has that ability where we could run up to 50 copies of this, which is why we're going to be running a whole bunch of him, and we want to see this card as often as we possibly can, so that way we could have him not only just be on the field, but we want him in our trash as well to use for our various abilities that want to put more copies of him in our inheritable sources to be able to make our Digimon as effective as they possibly can be. But essentially, what Vemmon is doing is he's going to be the dedicated searcher for the deck. Unfortunately, it's not an on-play ability to search, it's an activate main, where we're going to be suspending the Digimon, leaving him vulnerable to be able to look at the top 3 for a Snatchmon, Destromon, Galacticmon, or the option Fusionize, and be able to add it to our hand. And then if we see a Vemmon among those cards as well, we could put that card to the bottom of his inheritable source, so that way we could start building up our Vemmons and our inheritables to make our Digimon as effective as they possibly can when digivolving up the chain. Then he has a nice inheritable ability that's going to be helping reduce the cost of our Digimon to digivolve into Destromon and Galacticmon per Vemmon, so the more of this card that we have in our inheritables, the easier it is to be able to play our higher level Digimon. Next up, onto the champions, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Snatchmon. There really isn't any other level 4s that the deck wants, just because of how the deck is going to be built and operated, focused all around Vemmon's evolution line. So Snatchmon here has this nice when digivolving ability that allows us to be able to recycle 2 of our Vemmons and put them underneath his inheritable source. And then if he has 4 or more Vemmons in his inheritable source, then we also get a return of Fusionize from our trash to our hand as well, being able to reuse our cards, which is pretty decent, adding extra utility to the cards. It's not going to be very hard to get up to 4 Vemmons in his inheritable source, just because if we're digivolving on top of a Vemmon, that's already 2 Vemmons, then the 2 he's adding with his when digivolving ability makes the 4 to fully utilize the card. And then his inheritable ability is just adding some extra defense into the deck, where when we're going to be returning cards from our inheritable source to the deck, which is off of our higher stage Digimon, then it allows us to unsuspend the Digimon and give it blocker until the end of the opponent's turn to try to stop some of the opponent's possible aggression. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Destromon. So Destromon is a pretty decent card because when we digivolve up into him, he is also going to be adding Vemmons underneath him, so we want to make sure that we see a whole bunch of Vemmons, and that's kind of why we're running a whole bunch of Vemmons into the deck. So when we digivolve up into him and he has 5 or more Vemmons underneath him, which ideally we should have 4 off of Snatch and then 1 off of digivolving into Destro, then we get to delete one of the opponent's tamers, which having tamer hate is actually pretty important to try to stop some of those tamer-based strategies, which there's a lot of decks, especially in BT11, that want to be playing around with tamers. Then he has a nice inheritable ability for our Galacticmon, where he's basically just acting as a redirector, so not only do we have the ability to block and potentially multi-block with that unsuspend, but being able to redirect the attack, adding to the overall defensive capabilities of the deck, is just pretty decent. He also has a nice alternative Digivolution condition, where we could Digivolve him for 6 on top of a Vemmon, being able to skip the stages to add extra utility to how we could utilize these cards. And then as far as the level 6 goes, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Galacticmon. So Galacticmon, like Destromon, has that alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve him for 9 on top of a Snatchmon, or basically for 6 on top of a Destromon. But on top of that, we have the Vemmons that could be underneath it to be able to make Digivolving into those 2 Digimon a little bit more efficient in case we have to skip some stages and skip some levels, again, adding to the overall utility on how we could approach utilizing these cards. Then he has some really powerful abilities of his own, where he's going to be able to grab 4 Vemmons from our trash and put them underneath him. So we do want some Vemmons in our trash, and we do have ways to be able to trash our Vemmons, so that way we could utilize this ability to its utmost capacity. Then on top of that, he also has some pretty good removal ability attached to him when we utilize him in his full stack when he has 8 or more Vemmons, which ideally he would have 4 going into our Snatch, 5 going into our Destro, and then he's putting 4 underneath, so that should be at least 9 Vemmons that should be underneath him when we're just Digivolving up the chain normally. Then he has this nice Alterns ability, adding some extra protection to try to keep our Galacticmon around when we get up into him, where we get to place 4 Vemmons from his Digivolution source to the bottom of our deck, triggering some of our various abilities along the way to be able to prevent him from leaving play, which is just pretty powerful because this basically just counters all forms of removal, whether it's by putting him underneath your Tamer, putting him underneath your Digimon, putting him in your security, or in the deck, back to the hand, it doesn't matter. He just cannot leave play as long as he has enough Vemmons in his inheritable source, which is just super powerful at making sure that your Digimon is going to stick around for as long as it possibly can, because he has a nice third ability where at the start of your main phase, we just get to trash the top card of the opponent's security. This is going to be rewarding us with some nice passive burn on top of everything else that the evolution line is providing for us. And then the last Digimon of the deck, and only level 7 of the deck, is going to be 2 copies of DeathXmon. So this is kind of just a filler slot. It could really be anything you feel like you want it to be. I just really like DeathXmon because if our Galacticmon doesn't have any inheritable sources left in him, but is still sticking around, then we could Digivolve up into a DeathXmon or any other level 7 of your choosing. But DeathXmon also has that alternative way to be able to play the card, punishing the opponent for going wide with their Digimon in Tamers, making him easier to hard play and not necessarily want us to always Digivolve up into him. But he has a nice on-play when Digivolving effect that's acting like a pseudo board wipe to de-Digivolve the opponent's Digimon and delete all of the opponent's low-level Digimon, on top of recursive removal, always being able to delete the opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost at the end of their turn, only adding to the defensive and removal capabilities that this deck has to offer. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Izzy. So this is the BT4 version of Izzy, and this card is just going to be acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixer, so that way our turns will always start at 3 if it's ever less than 3, making sure that we could try to play our cards as efficiently as we possibly can, while also being a pretty efficient card himself, with his on-play ability allowing us to reveal the top 3 and rearrange them on any way that we want and put them back on the top, which is just pretty valuable for some of our abilities that are checking the top cards of our deck. We know if they're going to be hitting or not. But if all of the cards that are revealed this way are black, then we also get to gain 1 memory, effectively making him a 3-costed memory fixing tamer versus a 4-cost because the majority of the cards in our deck are black. And then the only other tamer of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Analog Youth. So Analog Youth is a really cheap 2-costed tamer to use to help with the deck's overall consistency, where we're going to be looking at the top 3, putting one Digimon card among them into our hand, and then trashing the rest, which is important because we do want to get some Vemmons into our trash to use for some of our various other abilities that we just saw on our Digimon. And then he has a nice upside that really doesn't necessarily matter too much in this style of deck, because ideally we don't want our Digimon to be deleted, but when our Digimon is deleted, we basically get to another raising phase on top of being able to gain 1 memory, which could be pretty helpful at times. And then lastly, onto the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ultimate Flare. So Ultimate Flare is basically just the big hard removal card to try to deal with some of the opponent's various Digimon that they could be playing, but could really be any big large body removal that we feel like we want to play around with. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Pride Memory Boost. So Pride Memory Boost is a pretty solid card for how this deck wants to play, because the majority of our deck is, well, Vemmons, and being able to look at the top 3 and playing a black Digimon with a play cost of 4 or less from among them for free is just pretty good at being able to get Vemmons on the field, to then be able to use Vemmon's ability to help us try to search and to fill up our inheritable sources, on top of the fact that it's going to be trashing the rest of the cards, so that way we have a way to be able to actively mill ourselves, to be able to have enough Vemmons in our trash to use for our various abilities, while being able to spawn Vemmons on the field at the same time, while also being a memory boost to be able to use its delay ability to gain 2 memory at a later turn, making for more powerful follow-up plays with. And then the last option card and last card of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Fusionize. So Fusionize is a pretty good card, not only just because it's already a pretty cheap option and can be cheaper with our Snatchmon in play, but it also has the nice ability to increase our sources from our trash to make sure that we have enough Vemmons in our Digimon when we're digivolving all the way up the chain, and it also allows us to help digivolve with Digimon in our trash, which could happen because of all of the different mill effects that we have, to be able to try to put Digimon in our trash on top of they could have ended up in our trash from being deleted. So it's allowing us to be able to reuse some of our cards to make sure that we could have as powerful of a board presence as we possibly can. And its security ability plays into that, where it allows us to look at the top 3 and be able to play a Vemmon from them and trash the rest, making it just a really good card overall to help with the engine of the deck. And then as far as the general game plan and gameplay goes, it's, like I said, a pretty straightforward deck where we're just trying to fill up our trash and look at the top cards of our deck for our Vemmons and be able to utilize them to try to make our evolutions cheaper, more efficient, and more powerful. So the way we're going to want to start is digivolving a Dorimon into a Vemmon and raising. If we need to hard play a Vemmon, that's fine, but this is the opportunity where in our early turns we want to try to set up our tamers, so that way we could try to continue the digging and the setup. So what we're going to then do is use our Vemmon, move it out, use its ability to try to add another Vemmon into its inheritable sources. Dorimon's going to help us draw a card for doing so, and then that allows us to be able to then digivolve into a Snatchmon, and then Snatchmon gets its full ability because he's already going to have 2 off of our 2 Vemmons that we used with our original Vemmon, and the 2 he's going to be adding from his ability. So we already have 4 Vemmons underneath our Digimon, which means that when we digivolve into Destromon or Galacticmon from this type of position, then it's going to have a reduced Digivolution cost of 4, making Destromon 1 to digivolve into and Galacticmon 5 to digivolve into. But if Snatchmon is going to live and we're going to digivolve into a Destromon, then Destromon is going to add another source underneath him, making it so that when we digivolve into our Galacticmon from our Destromon, then it's only going to cost 1 to digivolve into, and we get to pop one of the opponent's tamers from this position. And when we go into our Galacticmon, then we get to add an extra 4 more, so that way he's going to have plenty of extra Vemmons to be playing around with, to use as inheritable sources for protection. So in this type of a position, we're going to have at least 2 instances of protection, not counting any extra sources that we could shove underneath, utilizing our Fusionize. But even from our original Snatchmon position, just being able to warp up into another Galacticmon and add 4 underneath still will be 2 forms of protection, and it only costed us 5 to go into them, which is not terrible considering we're skipping the level 5 stage just to be able to get a Galacticmon onto our field. So that's just how we're going to be utilizing our Digimon, and again, we have a option like Fusionize to be able to help add sources to our Digimon and to be able to grab back certain cards utilizing this type of ability, especially with Snatchmon on our field to be able to make this card free to use. Then Pride Memory Boost, as I stated before, the majority of our deck is going to be Vemmons, so the high likelihood of utilizing Pride Memory Boost to hit a Vemmon and to trash the rest of the cards, again, to try to fill our trash, so that way we have Vemmons to use in our trash for some of our various other abilities, is just a raw value, on top of it being a memory boost for more powerful follow-up plays later. Then, similarly, to try to help fill up our trash, that's also why we're running something like Analog Youth, and Izzy just is a good generic tamer for us to use, while also being more tempo efficient. Then, that's where the level 7 comes in handy, just because a card like DeathXmon, whether we Digivolve it on top of a blanket Galacticmon, or we have a Galacticmon sitting on our field and are able to just hard play it, it's still just one of the easiest level 7s for us to use and play, especially since the deck is trying to control and limit some of the opponent's actions, and DeathXmon is a really powerful card at helping us achieve that goal as well. And then we do have some various other tech and tools that we could think about incorporating into the deck, all depending on what you're trying to gain out of the deck and the types of cards you want to be playing around with. So we actually do have access to a couple of decent generic Digimon in case you want to run something extra outside of the Vemmon line. So we do have some anti-meta Floodgate rookies in the form of Chumon and Chikurimon to try to stop some of the opponent's actions. Then we also have some security Digimon to be able to utilize our security. Then we also have some hybrids that we could think about playing because we're already wanting to play some tamers. So it's just an alternative win condition to just utilize our tamers to attack out of nowhere and be able to surprise the opponent, stealing some games. Then we do have some level 7s that we could think about utilizing in case DeathXmon is a little bit on the expensive side and we still want to run some level 7s for when our Galacticmon's inheritables are all used up and he's still going to be sticking around on the field. So Omnimon Zwart and Omnimon Alter S are both really good cards to be able to reuse in our Galacticmon from his inheritable source while also doing various other things. Omnimon Zwart I think is a little bit more beneficial just because he's helping fill up our trash while also being able to spawn extra bodies at the same time. Then we do have some pretty solid level 7s that can have on-delete abilities, like Omnimon's Work Defeat, and then we also could think about running Millenniumon. Even though we're decreasing our Digimon's DP, Digivolving Galacticmon into those two, they're still pretty decent and still have their own levels of synergy that the deck kind of wants to play around with. And then we do just have some various other techie level 7s to try to do various different things. So we could think about utilizing Chaosmon as a way to just gain an extra attack and have some extra forms of removal, which could actually be pretty good against decks like Black War Greymon. Or we could even think about utilizing Armageddonmon as a really cheap level 7 to Digivolve into and to be able to turn off the opponent's level 7s. And then we do have some pretty solid other removal options that we could think about running depending on the types of cards we want to play around with. Then we do have Black Memory Boost as another consistency tool to help try to dig out some of the parts and pieces that we're looking for, while also being a memory boost to gain us memory at a later turn for more powerful follow-up plays. And then if you want to increase some of the extra utility on our Digimon, we do have Final Zubagon Punch, which combos very nicely with Galacticmon. Being able to give him blocker, reboot, and security attack +1 just makes him an even stronger Digimon to play around with. Then we do have some other extra utility cards that we could think about running in the form of Breath of the Gods to not only just try to stop the opponent's aggression, but also giving our Digimon reboot and protection against DP reduction is pretty valuable, just because one of Galacticmon's biggest weaknesses is being DP reduced down to 0 because he doesn't have any protection against that natively. And then we also have a card like Congo to try to further stop the opponent's aggression, while also shutting down some of their lines of play. Then we do have a couple of other tamers that we could think about incorporating into the deck. Taikamiya is a pretty good one, not only as just another memory fixing tamer, but being able to boost our Digimon during the opponent's turn just makes them better defensive tools. Then Izzy and Joe is another pretty decent duo tamer to try to help us gain some additional memory and some extra card draw to try to make our deck as playable as it possibly can be. And then we even have some pretty good utility tamers that we could think about incorporating in the form of Daigo, where he's going to punish the opponent for unsuspending their Digimon, on top of the fact that we have alternative ways to be able to Digivolve into our level 6, and Daigo is just a good card to generically be able to give our Galacticmon blocker when we Digivolve up into it. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.